the most important thing for DMs to know before running this adventure, and we're gonna get into spoiler territory here a little bit. So the adventure begins in a tavern, sort of, but it's a restaurant. It's a fancy tavern restaurant. It is well renowned for its amazing dishes, many of which have a little magic imbued into them. And you are informed that Stumblenoodles are not currently on the menu, a favorite of the children in Daggerford, because the supplies have stopped coming in from Arthur Holrow, who is a sort of a very inventive farmer down the river. So the chef, Chef Kaga, tasks you to go figure out what happened. So during the tavern scene, for me, the most important thing for a DM to establish is this prior adventuring party. They did not make it. They found their bodies in a river, right? This is bad. Part of it is, obviously in a storytelling, it sets up some dread, and which is always nice to do at the beginning of an adventure. But it's also a warning to the players. We added a line for Kaga to say, these were the kind of adventurers who drew swords before they asked questions, and that's possibly why they ended up in the river. So it's a little hint to your players to approach this cautiously and with some nuance and compassion. So I would really drive that point home. They'll have more success with the adventure if they do. So as you arrive at the farm, we want to start immediately giving that sense of history. So that sense of what has happened here before you've arrived. And the amazing thing about Holrow Farm is that it has these magical, enchanting qualities, which makes this food so delicious and gives it its little extra something. But there's also been an abandoned farm now for a number of weeks. So I think the idea of there being evidence of really meticulous farming and care for these plants that have now overgrown. But they are lush plants. This is plant life that is growing from enchanted means, right? And so we're starting to give this little hint. And I do think the grave site is also a helpful place to point out. Most parties will sort of investigate outside before they head inside, and they're not hiding it, right? I mean, these would be the parents and Arthur, and I think seeing that some care has been taken to bury Arthur where no care was taken to the previous adventuring party is, again, a hint to the party at the story that lies within. So as your players get brave enough to actually enter the homestead, again, more hints in there. You can see that this space has been renovated, essentially, to accommodate a family of fire giants. So you will meet Ignis, who is the mother, and her twins, Flauma and Calor. And part of what I was so tickled when I had the idea of this adventure is the idea of giant toddlers, and that they would be 6 feet tall, but they would be toddlers, and they would want to play with toys, and they would have all of those qualities. And I just thought that could be a really fun role-playing opportunity. And just, what do you do when a 6-foot toddler wants to play with you and they will scream bloody murder if you don't, and you're trying not to get squashed by its mother, by their mother? That part of it really was exciting to me. So I can't wait to hear the stories that come back over the internet of people experiencing their parties dealing with these toddlers. Yeah, I'm very excited about it. There's this main section. This was a normal house that had floors and stairs and things like that, but Arthur, being the compassionate, excited, experimental person that he was, immediately started renovating the interior of this home for Ignis and her children. So he kept his little office, but pretty much the rest of the home has been opened up. So I always love the idea when I run it of, like, you can see along the wall where the floor jamb used to be for the second story, but they've knocked it down and they've put some boards up to try to help that. That they made this nursery up on top of the office, I think is really a great, again, indication that this was a group project. They renovated for this little found family that they had created. It is hot in there too. I think that's an atmospheric thing that I love, that she is stoking that fire to, sterilize the bottles for her children and to potentially make weapons if she needs to for the future, and that it is, she's accustomed to that kind of temperature, the heat of the forge, and so that is comfortable for her, but it might be oppressively hot for your players, and let that be a little like, whew, you know, call that out, I think is always fun, to bring the environment into the game. So in the library, the main thing is they'll want to find the Cheesemonger's Almanac, because that will help them find the cheese that they are here to look for. I do, again, like, I love, part of what I get so excited about this adventure is it's really just an ingredient hunt, but obviously we add in these other stories to kind of give it a weight and a thing to it, but it is really fun to me that, like, ultimately, you're here to collect some cheese. So you want to find the Cheesemonger's Almanac. There is also Holrow's sort of family history and some of his, information about his family there. And those are really good hooks for going forward. I was really interested in that, of like, can I write about the Holrows, this kind of interesting, eccentric family, and allow you to take that NPC, create something out of it that I never imagined, and place them somewhere in the world so that there is adventure to continue after this. So the greenhouse is where a lot of his most experimental work is happening. I liked the idea of having it because greenhouses are so fun. You can hide in trees and do all of that, and it's a place you can encounter Flauma as well. I think it's going to be one of your first, unless you're really, really brave and you climb up into the nursery, Flauma's probably the first fire giant toddler you'll encounter. I added a little table because, again, I wanted to help with the RP a little bit of these fire giant toddlers. This is a baby talk, a fire giant baby talk table. Usually in D&D we don't have to learn languages, and I felt pretty confident that any 10th level party worth its salt either speaks giant or has some way of comprehending languages. But I thought it would be really fun in the role-playing of the babies that they would have baby talk. So this isn't going to be exactly fire giant language, but it's going to live a little bit in a space. And so I just made up some words and that way you have, you can do a little baby talk. So I like the idea that as you enter the greenhouse and maybe for the first time encounter one of these toddlers, that Flauma would sort of toddle up to you and go, "Manji? Manji?" Because she thinks that you are toys. Again, how kind of terrifying and yet hilarious that moment could be. I do like etymology and things like that. So some of this comes from that, looking at different languages and different root words for something like toys. And so manji came up, and manjima we did for play, because if manji is toys and ima is mom, is mother, then manjima feels like mommy play in that way. So trying to kind of pull some ideas together with that. One of my favorite ones is sudlus, which means kiss. So I like the idea that the baby toddler might want to give you a kiss, or would want mommy to give them a kiss. So yeah, just thinking about those things that, what do very young children first learn to say? And it's the things that are part of their lives and that they know. And I like the idea that maybe a party could learn to speak a little baby talk fire giant. That would be fun. So trapdoors, always fun. Again, talking about tropes that Deborah Ann Woll enjoys, trapdoors are right up there. And I like the idea too. I think the box on there is like almost impossible for the players to move on their own. So I like the idea that you maybe either have to, you have to enlist the help of maybe Ignis, but maybe a fire giant toddler. I like the idea that that could be part of this adventure. It's like, how do we convince this like 1-year-old to push this box for us so we can get through the trap door? But that, of course, leads you into the basement, which has a lot of supplies that Arthur kept down there, but it also has the cheese, the all-important cheese that you were looking for. And it has his control group, his experimental group, and his saleable group. So you have to use the Cheesemonger's Almanac to do the logic problem of figuring out which of these cheeses is a saleable cheese. I tried very hard to make this a very threatening adventure. Because, the quick trope reversal that we do at the top of this is that actually the fire giant that you encounter is your ally, right? And really she and her family are the ones you're gonna help save. So when the final real threat comes, I wanted it to be pretty awful. So we have several full-grown, non-toddler fire giant combatants coming this way. They also have leashed hellhounds that are leading them. This should be a pretty terrifying prospect. Now, you do have an ally in Ignis to help you, but she's going to choose to protect her kids at all costs. And they want the babies. They want to take them back. This was, again, thinking back to like old Shakespearean history from, the history plays that he wrote and the things that like Richard III did, and how much having an heir and who those heirs belong to mattered. And I liked this idea that Ignis is a very important woman, and these children are now threats to people who wish her harm. And so that Invido's ultimate goal is to take these children and raise them as his own, so that she and her lover cannot challenge him for rule. So you have some a tall order to fill here. And also for DMs, moving on from this point, I love the idea of, hearing some of your adventures with Invido and what you choose to do to stop this injustice that is happening. When do you start the combat? When do you bring in the bad guys? I think, again, this is storytelling, and you're gonna know, you're gonna feel it, right? It should probably be at a high. Either they've gotten through some really tough challenge and they've finally figured it out. This is the cheese. Okay, let's go home. Boom, whatever it is. You want to kind of let them have a win and then say, good luck. I would also encourage, because these are 10th level adventures and they have a lot of advantages, you want them to be somewhat depleted. Now, not necessarily in hit points, but in terms of spell economy, features and traits that they have. You want to feel like once those fire giants and hellhounds show up, that they're a little like, ooh, I wish I hadn't used that for this. I wish I'd saved that. You want that little bit of dread to pop up. Again, to inspire the inventiveness of them thinking outside of the box of just what their character sheet says. The fire giants themselves are fearsome enemies, but again, their main task here is to defeat Ignis, stop Ignis from ever coming back, and find the twins. So those hellhounds, they'll fight you. The hellhounds and the fire giants will fight you, but they're pretty one-track mind. For you, you're just a little rat that scurried in and is in the way, right? But maybe you can use that to your advantage as a party. If they don't see you as a threat, you could potentially get the jump on them. So yeah, I would really let them be pretty single-minded so that the player's job is to stop them, not to necessarily fight them to the death. That'll I think make it a more terrifying adventure. It's not just you hit, I hit, you hit, I hit. It's how do I stop a creature that is 4 times my size from reaching in a hole and just pulling out these children and running away, right? I mean, it's a different kind of challenge than just which one of us is going to kill each other first. This is a space designed for medium creatures in which very large creatures are existing. And so this idea that the giants are very strong and can break things down, but they can't just enter any space that they want to, which helps a little bit in delaying their moves. They have to spend actions to break through the floor or break through the greenhouse or break through the door. It allows the DM and the players to sort of prolong the encounter, but in a variety of ways. It's not, again, just a hit, 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 back and forth. So yes, even if they do finally find Flauma and Collar down in the basement, they can't go in there. So, you have the fun of, again, we're going back to all those movies that I loved as a kid of, the hand reaching in, trying to reach around and find, if your party is in the cheesemonger's, cellar with the babies and you just see giant fingers come around the door, like that feels like a really fun story moment to me. And then suddenly a fist pounds down from the top. So again, it's using creatively the idea that these are giants and you're not in a big open field, you're in a house. It even harkens me back to that old movie where there was like a giant cat in a dollhouse, and that was the movie. And you're like, wow, yeah, that really looks terrifying. This big cat paw trying to come around the door. And So yeah, you know, if it helps you to like watch some of those movies or imagine some of, again, those tropes that you then get to put your players front and center for that show. So yes, if you're lucky enough to not be eaten by hellhounds or smashed by fire giants, yeah, there are a couple of other ways that this can kind of go down. You know, either you save Ignis, Flauma, and her children, and Kalor, and they're going to go off into the mountains to hide. And you can choose. Do you want to continue to protect them? Do you want to go after Invido? You know, how do you want to handle that situation? If Ignis doesn't make it, you are now in charge of 2 toddler fire giants. How would you like to take care of that? And even if you survive and they still get Flauma and Kalor out from underneath you, you have a fire giant community that you can go try to win them back. And maybe Ignis, if she's still there, will come with you. So I do think if you survive, victorious or not, there are many ways that this continues. And if you are ultimately victorious and you save them, there is, of course, the Holrows you can look into. There is bringing all of this juicy, lovely food that you've collected back to Chef Kaga, so you can finally dine on Stumblenoodles. Ignis is a very complicated person, right? She has a lot of responsibilities with her children being here and hiding out from the threats that are coming. But she's suspicious and she's on her guard. And the tricky part that I think is also the most fun, the balance of this adventure, is figuring out how to allow her to trust again and let these adventurers in so that they can help her, while also keeping her pretty fearsome. She's mama bear, and really leaning into that, you know, there is nothing you would not do for your kids. So he's part of a very illustrious family. Many of his siblings went off and did really exciting things in the world. Holrow was more of a homebody. He stayed home with mom and dad, but he was an experimental farmer. And he liked to sort of see if he could create different types of magical effects through the food that he grows. Arthur is ultimately, I think, a true hero. He might not be an adventurer. He might not be someone who can carry a sword, but he is someone with an open heart. And as soon as Ignis and her children showed up, he immediately saw an opportunity to do the right thing and to take them in and protect them as best he could. And so sort of offering up his home and completely, I mean, again, think about that. I mean, demolish the interior of his home to care for someone in need. And I love that as an icon of a hero, someone who is really that altruistic. So really, I think as you're running this adventure, the more you can honor Arthur Holrow, the better. I would definitely read those backstories. Make sure Ignis's backstory, Arthur's backstory, they're not very long. Get that in your bones, right? I'm a big proponent of, lots of DMs like to use screens. I'm a big proponent of like pushing the screen aside and being at the table with your players so that you are all playing together. And I think sometimes the best adventures are the ones where you just kind of know them inside and out. And if you know those stories, their 2 stories really clearly and cleanly, you'll be able to improvise and ad-lib and add to that story. Please add things that I have not added. So really lean into that and learn these stories so that when it's in the moment, you can feel a reaction the same way that Ignis might. I think that'll just really up the level of gameplay. The main thing I would say is do not pull your punches. A 10th level party can take a lot. Now these are some big bad combatants, and they are ruthless, right? The bad guys in this adventure will stop at nothing. So you have permission to hit these measly, squishy little adventurers with everything that you've got. They can take it. And you will be surprised the ingenuity, the inventiveness that comes out of players and parties being put in a tight spot is really impressive. And again, as someone who loves players, when they've used all their toys and really all that's left is the big gesture or an out there choice, that's again when you really start to see them shine, when they have to kind of pull things out that are not, so powerful, and they have to use something that maybe a real person in the real world would have to use, right? Compassion, persuasion, these things that we do. I don't know, I'm excited to see a 10th level party, reduced to very little, have to sort of pull upon other options. Best suited characters to this adventure would be those who have a moral compass of some sort. That doesn't have to be a lawful compass, but certainly one that says, they believe that the innocent should be free and, to live their lives, and that bad guys should not be allowed to just decimate. Winning this adventure will require that kind of a leap of faith, I would say. In terms of hooks, there's a number of things. There's the whole family of Arthur Holrow. You could have come to this from knowing one of them or meeting one of them. There's the missing previous party of adventurers. Maybe you knew some of them and they've gone missing. And then of course there's the River Shining Tavern, and something could have brought you there for a good meal, and then suddenly find out that Stumblenoodles are not on the menu right now. Terrible. So I think it's very rare that a party will show up and not speak giant, but even so, in a way, if your party shows up and does not speak giant, please actually really do write me, because I want to see how this would go down. I love the idea that this can become a pantomime, a Pictionary, a charades, however it is at your table, that allows all of you to start to try to figure out how do you communicate what is a fairly nuanced and in-depth backstory through other means. And I don't know, I'm excited about that opportunity. To me, it's not a failing of the adventure so much as it's actually an opportunity. I just wish more 10th level adventures didn't have the capability to speak giant, because I'm sure it's going to be rare. Other ways that help tell the story is the environment, right? Let that overgrown farm tell a story. Let the flowers laid delicately on Arthur's grave tell a story. Let the way that Ignis has meticulously cared for his home and doesn't let you just steal willy-nilly from him tell the story that she and Arthur had a bond, had a friendship. They may never get the literal story pieces if they don't speak giant, but it should be fairly clear that there is more going on here than just a giant who swept in and killed Arthur and a few other people. So puzzles are a hotly debated topic in the D&D community, and how to do that. And again, I'm always a proponent of players getting to also solve problems in the same way that the characters are. But hints are welcomed. I've always thought, sort of said, look, anytime an investigation, you want to roll an investigation check for a hint, you're welcome to. And if you roll very high, I might not give you the answer, but it'll lead you in a fruitful direction, or I will, walk you through half of it. There's like 3 things that come with the puzzle. 1 is how do you solve the puzzle? 2 is solving the puzzle, and 3 is the answer. So if your players really aren't into it, you could, on a first investigation check, you could give them how to solve the puzzle. If they're still not getting it, on a second investigation check, you can walk them through the first half of it. And on the third, you can say, and here's how you solve it, and you get the answer. But really, in the end, if you get the wrong cheese, you just don't get the boon. Anyone who knows me and my work knows that I love props, especially homemade ones that I have meticulously spent hours myself drawing and figuring out. I always imagined having like a poster board with all of the cheese on the shelves and like drawing in the different color rinds and the holes so you could actually like visually look at it. And I do think that's also fun because logic puzzles can be kind of a 1 or 2 person puzzle. And the idea of putting it up on a poster board, it just invites everyone to kind of jump in. And then if one person's like, okay, so in the first season, there's holes. Okay, this one has holes. Oh no, wait, but in the second, it would have gone away. Well, maybe then this one. That everyone can kind of look at that board and participate in a greater way. So yeah, I mean, I think you can always add props in that sense to kind of engage and involve everyone. So, part of the idea of this adventure is that it is relating to the, the Stumblenoodles recipe in Hero's Feast. So mostly you're looking to make, Stumblenoodles, macaroni and cheese. But at some point in different iterations, I also had involved chocolate. And so you were looking for cocoa beans as well as that. And you know, we kind of let that go in terms of the larger scale of the adventure, but I still just loved the idea that, again, like macaroni and cheese, chocolate is worth risking your life over. So if that gets you in the greenhouse, and that chocolate is going to fetch you a really good price at market. As your players may query themselves, why is it that Arthur Holrow has all of these magical ingredients and his land seems to be so lush and fruitful? We have added a little bit of lore into that you can find in some of the new publications from D&D and Wizards. There is a sleeping giant beneath his farm that lends some of these qualities. And so that is, again, another hook that your players can follow going forward. When your players are stuck or there's a key information that they need and they're not finding it, you know, it's a really good one because it's something that every DM kind of butts up against. So there are a couple of things that I do when running a game that are helpful. One, again, environment. Go with that environment. You know, literally, I have had situations where I'm like, a bird flies in and lands on a gravestone around the corner, you know, like anything in the environment that can kind of draw their attention. And, you know, you could call it fate, you could call it the gods, whatever you want to call it. There are ways to use the natural environment to just say, you know, the wind blows the vines across, and is that a glint of metal on the rock behind? You know, like a way to kind of bring people in. And maybe you choose your player with the highest passive perception so that you feel that it's gamified. But that's always been a useful trick for me. And then also go ahead and change it up, right? If they can't get into the library or they're just not finding that Cheesemonger's Almanac and they really need it, okay, he keeps it down with the cheese. You know, like you can absolutely, if there is something that you feel is essential information for your players to have, throw it in. All games are blueprints. These are offered tips and story hooks for you to tell the story that you want to tell. And if that means that you change up 500 things, you have my permission. You don't even need it. My only final, I suppose, words of wisdom for dungeon masters running this adventure is to not be afraid of the emotional moments within this, that this is a mother and her children. This is a loss of a dear friend in Arthur and a loss of her kingdom and her family and her community. And the more you lean into who Ignis is and what she is up against, again, with or without being able to speak giant, your players will understand on some gut level that she is good and worth their risking their lives. So yeah, my final advice is just to feel for Ignis, know her story and honor her story, and I think you can't go wrong.